Backstage update on Cody Rhodes' WWE surgery after his torn pectoral tendon. Naomi shares her first tweet since her WWE suspension after her walkouts. Plus, we have an update on Roman Reigns' reaction to facing Riddle next week for the WWE Undisputed Universal Championship. And WWE celebrates their latest backstage hires, including one former WWE Intercontinental Champion and WWE Hall of Famer. All this and more in today's WWE News. Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestling News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there are plenty of news stories to get into in the world of WWE. So let's start off talking about Cody Rhodes. Of course, what a week it's been for the American Nightmare, for the former AEW TNT champion. But there are more backstage updates when it comes to WWE superstar Cody Rhodes' injury, his surgery, why he actually wrestled at Hell in a Cell last weekend. Not necessarily why, but how he was cleared. It was a massive point of contention for a lot of people, a point of discussion as to why was he allowed to step inside not just a WWE ring, but also the Hell in a Cell structure, when clearly he has a torn pectoral tendon, completely off the bone. The injury is there to see, but there are more backstage updates when it comes to Cody Rhodes' injury. Now, according to a report from Fightful Select, which of course is Sean Ross Sapp, WWE was more lenient with allowing Cody Rhodes to wrestle against Seth Rollins at Hell in a Cell because the injury was as bad as it was. Because the pectoral was torn completely off the bone, further damage basically couldn't have been done. Now, it must be said, I'm not a doctor, so I always am working under the assumption of, well, unless basically the doctors came to the conclusion of this injury can't get any worse than it currently is. It's already really, really bad. It's the worst it could possibly be. It's torn completely off the bone. You can see the bruising. You can see the blood. You can see his arm all blown up and swollen up. You can see just the sheer amount of pain that he's in. So just go out there. Just go out there because it can't get any worse. Now, I'm always under the impression of, well, it can. It could have got worse. Thankfully, it didn't. Certainly, I hope not. Now, Rhodes suffered a partially torn tendon, right pectoral tendon, during this brawl he had with Seth Rollins on the Raw Go Home show to Hell in a Cell on the May 30 edition of Monday Night Raw. Now, the Friday before Hell in a Cell, so just a couple of days prior to the events, while of course he was weight training in preparation for the match, the tendon had torn completely off the bone, which led to the situation that it was in. So with the partial tear, I think the aim was, yeah, it's a little bit bad. If he rests up, if he rehabs, if we don't really try and aggravate it so much, he won't miss any time, certainly on television, maybe a little bit of time in the ring. He'll compete at Hell in a Cell, then maybe compete at Money in the Bank, and he'll be able to get through it. And then, of course, the weight training is really what exacerbated this whole thing. Now, there are also updates from Fightful Select about the surgery itself. Now, as noted, Rhodes went under the knife on Thursday to repair the torn tendon. Of course, his wife, Brandy, had tweeted, quote, "The doctor just repaired Cody's pectoral tendon, which was torn completely off the bone. Successful surgery. He's on the road to recovery now." Now, Fightful noted that Rhodes got into Birmingham, Alabama, on Wednesday to prepare for the surgery. WWE also had Rhodes do interviews and filmed material for a future documentary about his injury, which again is standard. I'm sure they'll probably have a Peacock or WWE Network documentary documenting his return to the company whenever it may be, whether that's at SummerSlam, whether that's at the Royal Rumble, whether that's at WrestleMania. We don't really know how long it's actually going to take. WWE did say 9 months on Friday on SmackDown, but my opinion is that they're inflating that number. It's the John Cena effect. They used to do it all the time with John Cena. They used to say he's going to be out for 6 months or he's going to be out for a year. John Cena would come back after 2 months. Now, sometimes, because John Cena is just a freak of nature, his actual recovery speed is so much quicker, but they do it with certain talents as well, because it's the ultimate babyface move, isn't it? Returning way before they were scheduled to. It's a surprise, it's a moment, and they're certainly positioning Cody Rhodes as the top babyface, really, in the WWE right now. So by doing that, by saying he's going to be out 9 months, and if he returns after 3, he will look very impressive, certainly, won't it? Cody Rhodes was reportedly back home by the weekend as well. As I mentioned, he's expected to be out of action for 3 to 5 months, which of course is significantly less than the 9 months that was mentioned on SmackDown. I still, honestly, am not ruling him out of winning the Money in the Bank briefcase, which I know seems insane to say. Money in the Bank's on, July 2nd? I think it is, July 2nd, from the MGM Grand Garden Arena there in Las Vegas. I just think there could be a possibility of some kind of shenanigans or something that happens. Someone gets taken out of the match, whatever. Cody Rhodes enters the match basically in a sling or something like that and still wins the briefcase. Or maybe Seth Rollins is in that match and in the closing moments, he's climbing the ladder. It looks like he's going to grab the briefcase, and wouldn't you know it, Cody Rhodes' music hits. He comes down, he climbs the ladder with one hand and grabs that briefcase and says, I wasn't cleared to compete. I wasn't even in the match. And then you can have this whole storyline, I suppose, whereby is it even legal? Is that even right? Is he technically a Money in the Bank briefcase holder? Can he actually have that contract if he wasn't in the match? Then he can stay off TV for a while. Maybe he can be suspended for interrupting a scheduled match, a main event, premium live event match. There's certainly ways they could go around it. I think always the plan was for Cody Rhodes to win the Money in the Bank ladder match, to challenge Roman Reigns, not at SummerSlam, that's going to be Randy Orton, not at Clash of the Castle, that's going to be Drew McIntyre. I don't think we're going to see, Cody Rhodes versus Roman Reigns at WrestleMania next year. It was a possibility, certainly as to what the situation and schedule is with The Rock, because I think the plan is for The Rock to face Roman Reigns at WrestleMania next year. Whether that's for the title or not remains to be seen. But certainly I think the plan was for Cody Rhodes to win the Money in the Bank briefcase. And another idea I had previously, because we know the undisputed Universal Championship is going to be split in half once again, is that maybe after he faces Randy Orton in the main event of SummerSlam and he wins Roman Reigns, that's when Cody Rhodes would have come out, cashed in the briefcase on the WWE Championship, and that's how he becomes the WWE Champion. And then you've got the WWE Championship on Raw, the Universal Championship back on SmackDown once again. I felt that might be the direction they were headed in. Obviously, this injury has really thrown a wrench into those plans, but realistically, they could still maybe kind of stick to it. It depends on the recovery time. It depends on the actual severity of the injury. We know the injury is serious, but there are ways around it, certainly. So keep an eye out when it comes to that, when it comes to Cody Rhodes. Let's talk about Naomi. Of course, Naomi and Sasha Banks, their walkout of WWE and subsequent suspension, one of the biggest stories of this year so far. And Naomi took to Twitter for the first time since her WWE suspension. Now, of course, May 16 episode of Raw, Naomi and Sasha Banks were supposed to be in that main event to determine the new challenger for the Raw Women's Championship. The match was changed due to Banks and Naomi leaving the building during the broadcast. Shortly after the incident, WWE issued a statement saying that they had relinquished their tag team championships. They had walked out of the company because they felt they weren't respected. They also, WWE claimed that they felt unsafe inside the ring with certain opponents before walking out, which has been heavily disputed since then. But in a tweet, Naomi shared an inspirational video that stated, quote, "What's popping? These are 5 things you need to hear today. Let's go. 1. Important people come and go. That's okay. 2. You can look at it as rejection or you can look at it as redirection. 3. You define what fun is. Don't allow someone to make you feel like what you like is stupid. 4. Sometimes you're going to have to let other people down to make yourself happy. 5. Diet isn't just what you eat. Your diet is what you watch, listen, and allow around you." So I think that maybe the biggest points there, and you can look at it in several different ways. Is it cryptic? Is it this? Is it that? Is it a hidden message? You can read into it as you would like. You can say it's got hidden messages or whatever. Probably the biggest point is 4. Sometimes you're going to have to let other people down to make yourself happy. She's probably referring to the fans and how WWE has referenced they're letting the WWE Universe down or letting fans down, millions of fans around the world down. And her point is maybe I did, but I had to make myself happy, and that's what's important. And I do agree with that. I do. We mentioned that next Friday on SmackDown there is going to be a WWE Undisputed Universal Championship match, being Roman Reigns versus Riddle. And Reigns tweeted yesterday in response to the match being made, quote, "Now I have to leave the private island, jump on a private yacht, and then board the private jet just to smash this idiot on SmackDown. Tribal Chief problems." As I mentioned, Riddle defeated Sami Zayn on SmackDown this week to earn a shot at the Undisputed WWE Universal Championship on next week's edition of SmackDown. Now, obviously, Reigns is not going to be competing at Money in the Bank. That's why they're having this match on SmackDown. Previously, the match was internally scheduled, it looks like, for Money in the Bank from Allegiant Stadium to have Riddle versus Roman Reigns. Of course, once they moved that show from the stadium to the MGM Grand Garden Arena in Las Vegas, they obviously changed their plans there. Reigns was taken off the show because he's got limited appearances. He's got a limited schedule after signing that new contract after WrestleMania. So they're having the match on SmackDown instead. And Roman Reigns clearly is going to win that one. Finally, it's been confirmed what was already reported, I think, a few weeks ago. But WWE is celebrating its newest hires, some more prolific than others, with a new video posted on social media. As can be seen on social media, several new additions to the company have been placed in their respective roles, including WWE Hall of Famer Jeff Jarrett. The newest members of staff include William Naden, who is the manager of fan analytics, Eli Hutton, which is going to be an analyst, advertising analytics, Rena Puswad, an administrative assistant, AJ DiCarlo, a senior director of product design, Kalina Teller, who's going to be a product manager, Holly Mitchell, a senior producer, Rohit Bandari, manager of global strategy, Jeffrey Jarrett, not Jeff Jarrett, Jeffrey Jarrett. You can just hear it in a Vince McMahon voice, can't you? Hello, Jeffrey. Jeffrey Jarrett is the senior vice president of live events booking, which again had been reported previously. We'll touch on Jarrett in a second. Gregory Miller, who's an associate content producer, Suzette Ramirez Carr, who is the executive vice president, chief human resources officer. As mentioned, it was reported near the end of May that Jarrett would be returning to WWE shortly after accepting his new role as Senior Vice President of Live Events Booking. He most recently worked for WWE a few years ago, actually, being one of the many releases during the pandemic. At the time, he was a producer, member of the creative team, and then an executive of Live Events before his exit. Since then, of course, he's got his podcast. He's been working with GCW, NWA, Lucha Libre AAA as well there in Mexico. But he's now back with WWE. People have been saying, is he qualified for this role? Jeff Jarrett's actually got a very unique list of qualifications, being, running a pro wrestling company for years. And even when he's been outside of Impact Wrestling, he was very instrumental when it came to having New Japan distribution on Fight TV over in America for Wrestle Kingdom show. So he knows the industry very well. Does he really know live event bookings very well? I don't know, because one of TNA's biggest issues back in the day was their live events and their ability or inability to tour. So I don't know what that necessarily means, but we'll have to wait and see on that one. Anyway, guys, be sure to smash a like on the like button. Be sure to subscribe, bottom right-hand corner, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon. Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right-hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.